On today's video, we are going to talk about fine versus thin hair. I will get this comment a lot that people will tell me that my hair is fine and not thin. And you are correct, my hair is fine, but it is also thin. Now, my haircut and the way I style it definitely aids to my hair looking thicker. But if we get in here into my hair, we can see scalp very easily, especially in the areas around my face. My hair is thin and it is very fine. Now, that's not to say I have the thinnest hair. There is absolutely people with much thinner hair than me. In fact, I have a good handful of clients whose hair is significantly thinner than mine. But when my hair is pulled into a ponytail, the diameter of that ponytail at the base is still less than an inch, so it still qualifies very well within the parameters of thin hair. But what is the difference between thin and fine hair, and what does it mean? I have a hair stuck on my face somewhere and I cannot get it off. So I'm going to put up a little illustration. So thin is going to refer to the density of our hair, how many strands of hair are on our head, and fine is going to refer to the texture and the diameter of each strand of hair. So as you can see in the illustration, there is fine hair, normal hair, and thick or coarse hair. We usually call it coarse. A lot of people call it thick, and technically the strand is thicker, but we usually use thin and thick to describe density, so we're going to use the word coarse to describe a thicker strand of hair. So a fine hair strand is going to be made up of less layers, and the cuticle structure is generally also really, really tight. So you can see on the edges of the fine strand illustration, the edges of the hair strand are very smooth, and when you get up to the coarse one, the edges of the hair strand are a little bumpy because there are so many thick layers of cuticle packed on top of each other in that coarse hair strand that some of those cuticle layers lay open, and that gives the hair typically more frizz, more dullness, whereas fine hair is typically really smooth and shiny, and that's why you're going to struggle with things like your hair holding curls and whatnot. The tighter that outer cuticle layer is, the harder it's going to be for your hair to hold volume, for your hair to hold curls, and the more easily your hair is going to look dirty from products or oily from your scalp, things like that. Whereas the more raised your cuticle structure is, the more your hair is going to absorb things like products, absorb things like oil, all of that. And it's also why if you dye your hair or bleach your hair, even if it's fine, you will find after dyeing and bleaching it that it might curl better. It might not get greasy as faster. That's because those cuticles are no longer fully laying flat after a chemical process. Even though they do close back down after the process, they never close as tightly and fully as the virgin hair. So again, fine is referring to the texture. You can have very thick fine hair, meaning you have a lot of hair strands. I have some clients with very heavy, thick ponytails, but their hair strands are so fine. They've got millions of little itty bitty hair strands. And then I have clients who have thin hair that is super coarse. So their actual strands are robust and fat and frizzy and coarse and have curl and texture to them. But if you were to straighten their hair, you can really see how the density of their hair is very low, and you can actually see through it because their hair is thin and there's not a lot of hair strands. So again, we'll look at the illustration and we will see the difference between fine and coarse hair. You can see with the same amount of strands, it's going to have a very different look if you have fine hair versus if you have coarse hair. Now, the difference between thin and thick hair is someone who has more hair strands versus less hair strands. And sometimes we have less hair strands because our follicles aren't growing hairs because of, hormones, hair loss, all kinds of different issues, medications, stress. Sometimes our follicles shed hairs and don't regrow new ones, and then our hair is going to get thinner. But sometimes we just don't have as many hair follicles. Not everyone's born with the same amount of hair follicles. Just like some of us have more hairy bodies and coarser body hair on parts of our bodies, some of us have coarser and more hairs on our head, and some of us have finer and less hairs on our head. Everybody's different. And if you are somebody who was born with fewer hair follicles. No product in the world is going to make your hair thicker once all of your hair follicles are producing hairs. So your hair at its best state still might not be thick and luscious like you dream of, because you simply do not have the hair follicles to produce those hairs. And unfortunately, nothing can produce new hair follicles aside from a hair transplant. You can transplant follicles from one part of your body to another to thicken those areas, but nothing, not even minoxidil / Rogaine, is going to make you grow new hair follicles. Products like minoxidil are going to invigorate hair follicles that are already there to start producing good hair, as opposed to hairs that fall out or don't grow back, but it's not going to give you new hair follicles. Think of your hair follicles like little pores on your head that spout hairs, and while you can make new hairs come out of hair follicles that stopped growing hairs, you cannot make new pores. I hope that helps. I hope that clears up some of the confusion over thin versus fine. And obviously if you have thin hair that is also fine, it's a double whammy. It's extra hard to deal with. But sometimes people have hair that appears thinner than it, thinner than it is because of how fine their hair is. If I had a coarser texture of hair, my hair would appear a lot thicker. Or people have hair that appears thicker than it is. I have a friend whose hair is very thin, but because she has such coarse curly hair, as long as she wears her hair naturally, you wouldn't really know how thin her hair is. This is all just to say that we are all unique, we are all individuals, and instead of trying to fight against what you genetically have, let's just learn to work with it. Because when you work with what your hair naturally is, you're typically going to get the best results and your hair is going to look its best. That's not to say you can't straighten your hair if it's curly or curl your hair if it's straight, but doing those things in ways that works for your hair type and learning about your hair type and your hair's limitations and your hair's strengths versus its weaknesses is what's going to help you be really, really successful when it comes to styling your hair in a way that you could begin to really enjoy and love. Let me know in the comments if there are any other hair issues that you would like me to clarify or address, or if there's any questions on the topic of fine versus thin hair. Thank you so much for watching today. You know I love having you here. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of my other videos. Bye.